No, right now he's independent living. But it's not bad either. Steve come in.
The other shoulder or the same shoulder?
Figure shoulder.
Same shoulder.
They said that it had previous turn on. And then turn it on, it was lying on the table to do his back.
Just forgot about that.
That's right.
Yeah. When they run and look at his back anyway.
Okay, so.
Excuse me, yeah. Sorry. Remy told me he's had a lot of trouble with.
Yeah, yeah. And he had, yeah, in 18 months, he had 5 or 6.
About miter, beautiful.
And then
Heart
you-
surgery. Yeah, yeah,
So
that's
say you
minor
can,
stuff.
I'm just gonna follow.
Monitor.
Okay.
Physically, I'm. Mentally, emotionally.
Yesterday, huh?
Yes, like a lot of people.
Like not on
A
Facebook.
lot of people.
Okay.
Oh, I have to pick that up.
Yeah.
Right.
You're gonna come with all of this.
Trying to Facebook.
No, but everything.
I have a link
This is
to
my family.
Yeah, church
And it's
Facebook.
not my
I don't look at it. It's not.
It's my family by marriage.
Ah,
It's swap.
once in a while.
Yeah, it's not my family.
It's what?
And so that's why I put all of this on
Another
that
field.
I will give you the family tree. And I'm way over here
Facebook, okay. person.
because my
Yeah.
brother
I get
happens
so
to
many
marry
from people that.
the granddaughter.
Who cares?
Usually, I know. Well, I mean.
This is right.
Yeah.
Here, look at this.
I.
Not my family.
Are you
but
saying
my
that? Are you
friends.
saying
I
that?
know,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You thought
you know, there's a lot of.
My criminal relatives,
I'm
don't worry, he is not my
If
criminal.
they find happiness in doing that.
We won't be talking about them today.
That'll be book 2.
Okay.
Well, truth be told, that's where I found my great grandfather when I was searching for him, 15 years ago when I started family history research. I found him in Stillwater State Prison.
Oh, gosh.
I'm sorry I said that while you were drinking.
Oh, no.
One person.
I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, fans.
But I'm fine.
Oh my gosh.
And Maisie, is the good word a good word? Does she know yet?
No.
She does not. She won't know till this week.
I mean, even years ago.
I think so.
Oh,
You said it was this night.
Good. I mean,
yeah, they were brothers.
morning, Mary.
Oh, I, yes, it's always been a blessing.
May I introduce you to her?
Years she was worried that the third family. Say, I'm not saying.
Well, she'll work. Setting her up.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, don't have to shovel snow anyway.
That's nice.
Oh, God. Don't.
Yeah.
I just.
I don't know, get enough that then.
Yeah.
It's getting to run right.
My mom's brother.
It's all. I can't tell. I'm never gonna believe this.
Oh, my God.
Oh. It's not- I just started with my grandparents. My grandparents. Vast woman here. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
I'm seeing criminals here.
Yeah.
Stories are coming out.
I still keep doing a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, nobody's free about that.
Yeah. No, blowing that. Number 11.
Wait, hey, Yeah.
No, but I read the book,
We have the same birthday.
is this Dylan Fletcher? Read that. That's a good one.
I'm just saying that I.
What he said is really awesome.
Yeah.
That's true. John wants to know.
The brand.
And then do the one with.
Okay, are you gonna, I'm gonna be roaming around a little bit.
It's amazing those buildings are.
Okay, good. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this little discussion that we're gonna have. Eventually, it'll be interactive, but I do want to start by telling you that I was supposed to be paired with a different scripture reading, which was a great segue into this. And so what you're going to get is a preview of the scripture that will be read 2 weeks from today.
Thank you for turning that up.
Yeah, like I say, I just follow orders and that happened. So, oops, I went ahead too much. So 2 weeks from today, you will be reading the chapter of John about the man born blind who tells the truth. That's going to be the introduction to the book that I researched, which was Truth, Lies, and Love, the true story of Albert St. Aubin. And I'm going to start with something that I found from a Crossways Bible study, which is walking through the Bible studying the Bible over the course of 2 years. And this guy, Harry, said the fourth gospel of John takes the form of a trial narrative. Perfect. As Jesus' mission unfolds, he declares that he supplants and replaces all Jewish institutions and observances, a message that angers his hearers. Well, that provides a great introduction to what we're going to be talking about as well with regard to the book that I wrote. So the healing of the blind man is the 6th of 7 signs which point to Jesus as the Messiah. So I'm going to give you a summary, and it's going to be pretty quick because we want to get into a different aspect of today's discussion. The disciples ask, who sinned? Jesus answers, neither. It's so that God's works will be revealed in him. All these messianic acts that are happening in the Gospel of John. Jesus uses his spittle and dirt to make mud, put on the blind man's eyes, and says, go wash. It's almost like a sacrament because there are earthly elements there. Vision is restored. The neighbors are questioning, how did this happen? The healed man tells the truth. Neighbors bring the man to the Pharisees, who ask, how is it that he could see? The healed man tells the truth. The Pharisees, just as a little background, They were the ones who had strict observance of religious ceremonies and practices, adherence to the Mosaic laws and oral traditions. They separated themselves for study and believed in an afterlife and the coming of a Messiah. They state, the Pharisees state, that Jesus is not from God because he broke the law of the Sabbath. He didn't follow the rules. Divisions ensued. The blind man tells the truth again. In verse 18, the opposition calls forth the man's parents. So now we're going to find out what happens there. The parents validate the healed man's parentage, but they are so fearful of the opposition that they refer them back to their adult son and they say, ask him, he's of age. The opposition declares that Jesus is a sinner because he broke the law. Pharisees are met with a dilemma. This situation just doesn't fit into their paradigm of what the Messiah would do or not do, would be or would not be. The healed man had told his story 3 times and was convinced that Jesus was from God. The healed man is then thrown out of the temple. Jesus finds the man, declares to him that he's the Son of Man, and states, I came into this world for judgment so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind. Ouch, to the ears of the Pharisees. This is a biblical record of truth, healing, broken law, misunderstandings of what was foretold about the coming Messiah, and about love. Truth, Lies, and Love, the true story of Albert St. Aubin and his legacy, is a researched story of truth, lies, broken laws, revisioning, and Esther's legacy of love. That's why that scripture was just so great.
Now are we all excused?
You are ready for 2 weeks from today. But you'll hear a very good sermon about the woman at the well. Stephen was convinced I could refabricate and make the relationship between what I wrote and the woman at the well, and I said, too much work. This just fed into my, literally into my hand. So you need to know, I am not going to test you on this genealogy, but many people think mistakenly that this is my relative. He is not my relative. He's my relative by marriage, and I will explain that. But Albert St. Aubin is not my blood. Here's what happened in the beginning. My sister-in-law, Nancy, found a picture of Albert, who is or was her biological grandfather, but she never knew him, and asked me, who loves to do family history research. She said, find out what you can about him. It was a simple question of curiosity, nothing more. And I will let you know a little bit later why she never knew about this guy. I discovered he was a career criminal. Reading his prison and court files hooked me as I was reading the numerous lies spoken under oath. And one of the experiences that I had was I'm putting my head into this file and just shaking my head just as another file was being brought to me by the people at the History Center. And I look up at this woman and I say, you can't make this stuff up. And she looked at me and said, it's fascinating, isn't it, to read someone's prison file. So that hooked me. And what I needed to do then was I needed to ask Nancy if she was open to my writing up the story of St. Aubin for his descendants. Now you need to know that the name St. Aubin through adoption became the name Magnuson. So now I'm going to review for you the relationships. We've got Albert St. Aubin, who is stationed at Fort Snelling in World War I, who really enjoyed what was happening around the Minnehaha area and Nicollet Avenue. There was a lot of happening stuff going on in that area. Met Esther Stoll in 1917. Esther Stoll was 19 years old, and she was a servant, a housekeeper, a maid in Minneapolis at the time, living in a room in an apartment on Hennepin Avenue. He was 29. She was 19. This is significant. Eventually. What happens is they didn't get married, but he impregnated her. I was asked by a reader, why did you do just research and not more narrative to build a different story? I didn't feel that I could project what he was thinking. I did as much as I could in terms of research about his family that he came from. And there were clear indications that Albert St. Aubin was smart. He was very engaging, very personable, and used to getting his own way. And his way was void of the morality of, when I steal from you, it really doesn't bother me. Well, my daughter, I had two editors. I just want you to know that the first editor was Bob Reichman. He apologized for not being here. He read entire draft 1 and draft 2 and gave me feedback. The editor who brought it home was our daughter, Naomi. And she and I had a discussion. My gut told me that because of the age difference and the temperament of each of these people, he was a street smart guy. She was 19 years old, new to Minneapolis. She was a servant. And I was convinced that he raped her. But I couldn't say that in the book. But when my daughter and I were talking about it, that 10 years is huge in terms of these two people being separated by age and experience. The part that was interesting was finding her intake records. There was a resource in 1918 that housed unwed women and supported them. It was called Bethany Home. She stayed there And he came to that interview, and I was amazed that he did that. But that was the last time she ever saw him, because she was now taken care of by Bethany Home. He could just wash his hands of it and walk away. She then goes back to her home in Wisconsin and lives with her family, who loves her, cares for baby Virgil. And she receives all of the support that she possibly could have gotten by a loving family. When Virgil, who was born with the name Saint Aubin, when he was 2.5, Esther married Melcher, and Melcher adopted Virgil. So now his name is Virgil Magnuson. Virgil, I knew Virgil Magnuson, and he was a salt of the earth man. He was lovely. He married Jean Olson, and they had 2 children, Nancy and Mavis. Nancy married Paul, my brother. So I'm way over here. I'm not in the bloodline, but because I knew Virgil, and because I learned later in life, his being adopted was not even an issue. But the reason that I didn't know about that until later in life is because there was only one thing said about Albert St. Aubin from Esther. She said he was not a good man. She never expanded on it. That's all Nancy had ever heard. That's all Virgil ever heard. And when Jean asked Virgil at one point, are you interested in finding out any more about your biological father? He said, no. Esther is the heroine of my story. She loved Virgil to the max, and he respected his mother to the max. And then, so just so you know, Melcher was a widower because his wife died in childbirth in 1918. So Virgil had a non-blood brother. And in green are the descendants. So my nephew, Paul Laux III, my niece, Laura, and Lisa. Out of these 4, and then Mavis married Bruce and had Morgan. Out of these 4 green grandchildren to Virgil, only one of them has children, and that's Lisa. And so these are the greats. Let's see. Son, grandson, great-grand. These are the great-grands of him. That line is just dwindling. I wrote the book so they would know about their relative. So that's how it started. And then I went down to the History Center and started reading these prison files and got hooked. And then not only was I reading his file, but then I was going on to read his accomplices' files, because they were even more colorful than St. Aubin. It turns out St. Aubin was actually the most boring of the criminals. So it was never on my bucket list to write a book. And the purpose behind it was so that this history would be told to this family. Any questions that you have so far? Yes.
I'm curious, where in Wisconsin is Esther Sveom from?
She lived in the US federal census said Osceola, but it was actually Dresser.
Yep.
So you had to go a little bit further east and north and lived by, I cannot remember the name of the lake, Green Lake or something they lived by. But her parents are immigrants from Sweden, and Mrs. Stoll, her sister came with her sister came with her husband, and then they had adjoining farmlands.
Thank you.
Yep. Anything else before we move in? Here's what I learned about the research process. I'm keeping it to 3 things because I learned a way lot more than was what I'm listing up here. The research path is not necessarily going to be linear. There was a lot of branching off that happened when I found out that Esther was at Bethany Home and I could find her intake papers. That was a branch. When the other things that branched off from were his accomplices, Stillwater State Prison system from 2 different perspectives, the John O'Connor layover system, the development of the FBI, and then a bit about organized crime.
Have you put any of that into practice?
Say again.
Have you put any of that into practice?
It was just fun, Aaron, researching all this. So I branched out. It was the story, if the story had only been about St. Aubin, it wouldn't even have been a book. So the research revealed layers of criminality within the systems named above. So here was something that I knew I went into this research process with, and that was naivete. I had not yet, or to that point, I had not studied any of these systems that were deep enough for me to realize how much criminality there is within any of the systems that we had formed in our society. I was very naive about that. I was more judgmental about the criminals I was studying until I realized the ones who weren't labeled criminals were criminals too. And so that was a big learning for me. I also learned that the research process never ends, that the researcher needs to determine a stopping point. So when I referred to Bob earlier, he read drafts 1 and 2, which were 100 pages longer than what was actually published. Because what I find interesting in my research is not necessarily what you as a reader are going to find interesting. And how that information spoke to me was because these people lived in my brain as I was doing this research. But that's not what the typical reader is going to find, that they become a part of your being. So between work that I did and then when Naomi came on board, we cut 100 pages. Any questions so far about the research process?
100 pages built.
Oh, yes, because Because draft
Question?
one, oh, he asked, are those 100 pages still available? Yes, they're in draft one, they're in draft two. I keep all those drafts because it would be throwing away research if I were to do that. And so I kept everything, and Carol found the most recent edit. She found a year that I had put as 1929, which should have been 1927. And so I have some books up here, and that was an easy one. I just did the whiteout. But otherwise, I have to, of course, go through my daughter, who has all of the master copies and any updates that I make. Any other oh, we got questions. Let's start with Erin.
Well, I was just gonna say, the implication of your last comment being that you may republish this book. I would suggest you put that tree in the book,
It is in the book.
not like that. I just look.
You are correct. I have from this point up in the first part of the book, so that I put that there on purpose because critique had come back to me. How do I keep track of all these people? And so I put these in the front. Actually, Jean wasn't even in it. Marvin wasn't either. And then at the back of the book, I did the straight line of St. Aubin all the way down to my nieces, my grandnieces, niece and nephews. So you're right, Erin, it's not done in one.
Well, and it's not done in that sort of tree form either. I think it would be a nice visual.
It would, it's kind of a, it's a little more difficult to format something
Oh.
like this. And my daughter would be able to do that, but I didn't ask her to. Yeah.
That's understood.
And so, yeah, I apologize, but, and then Roy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do, as a hobby, antique car research and writing. So I totally identify with determining the stopping point. Can you give examples, either real or just a theoretical example of how you find a stopping point, or the rabbit holes that you start to go down and then stop and
There are
continue down
many.
the rabbit hole or crawl out?
What?
Being a car person.
Being a car person. Yeah, see, you know what I did, Roy? My brother Paul, he's the one who just passed last July. And you'd have loved him. He read every piece of information from any auto magazine that came out. He was brilliant with regard to anything about cars. So there was a point that I thought, I want to know how you steal a Model T. I'm my brother's sister.
Sure.
And so I wrote up this whole section on how to steal a Model T. But it got axed.
I'd like to read it.
He wants the 100 pages also.
Or just those 4 or whatever.
Right, right. But what, I think it got to the point, and this is purely a subjective statement, it just got to the point where I just wanted it to be done and published.
Totally identify with that.
So, but I was still gathering research. This was published in the end of August of this year, or last year. And I was still writing to the archives, military archives, about one of the accomplices in May. So,
Kathy's heard me say, with whatever the item is, I'm done like at least 3 times.
Right.
Per item.
it takes 3 times.
Yeah.
Yep.
Minimum.
Susan,
I was just wondering, like the prison, the research that you did on the prison records, is that available like after maybe a certain amount of time? Like, is it public information or?
good question. So the question was, when you do research about the prison is different from the prisoners. So the prisoners I don't have public access to files until 75 years after they've been discharged.
Okay, okay.
And so there were, I think, 2 out of the 4 files that I read that I needed to have, the archivists needed to go through and weed out or check for any information that was not appropriate for me to see. Now, the truth is I had access to all 4 of the people's files completely because there was nothing sensitive that had to be pulled. But it's also the same, I believe 75 years is also the same for people who have been institutionalized in hospitals.
Okay.
Because I had to access my grandfather's files. It was either 50 or 75 years before I could see everything. As far as the prison itself, I simply took information that was published about Stillwater State Prison. It used to be in Stillwater. Stillwater State Prison is actually now in Bayport. They took it from the swampy area of Stillwater and they moved and built a new building up on a hill because that happens with water. It was a pretty dismal place of the original site. But it was actually, Stillwater State Prison was considered kind of state of the art in early 1900s. And so they received tourists, not tourists per se, but researchers who wanted to know how to emulate what had been done in Stillwater in other parts of the country. So what happened was you'd get the tour that was programmed and staged
And sanitized.
and sanitized. That's exactly right. And then what happened was I don't even know how I found it, but I found a book that was written by a former inmate. And when Bob was working with me, he said, that was fascinating. And again, with Naomi's help, we edited it down and the whole book is fascinating. So if you want to read life at Stillwater State Prison in 1923 from a prisoner's point of view, the name of the article, and it was published in the Minneapolis paper, was The City of Wicked Memories. So we get 2 different perspectives on Stillwater State Prison. You get the institutional, sanitized viewpoint, and then you get the prisoner who knew these tours were happening and referred to them in his book. So that was fascinating. And I may be just, I could talk about this forever, so we'll just move on to the personal learnings. And then these again are only 3 points, and that's the point at which I'm gonna pull out questions. If you don't have any, I've got someone who had written questions that she wanted answered after reading it. I found myself moving from the specific information about St. Aubin as a criminal to the broader spectrum of criminality found within the systems surrounding criminals, police, judicial, and prison/parole systems. So now get this next one. These systems were influenced by the era in which they existed. Prohibition was from 1920 through 1933. Did you ever wonder how the 1920s could be roaring during the alcohol ban? And then the Great Depression. So what was very obvious is that all of these systems were turning the blind eye to prohibition. They were meeting in public places, but then there might be someone at the door who would take your money. so that they would be able to enjoy their company and their alcohol, but they wouldn't be taken to court for it. They were the ones who were writing the rules or doing the adjustment to the rules to their own favor. In fact, my first cousin told me that his father, my uncle, told him once, there's a little bit of larceny in all of us. And then I learned that I prefer researching to writing. Writing is difficult. And the only writing I needed to do was create the transition from one topic to the next. And some people are brilliant at doing that, and some of us struggle. So my joy was in researching. So I have questions. I'll take questions from you. And then before we close, I'm actually going to let you know that there are some Netflix documentaries that I have watched. I don't have this written down for you. It's just here. One of them is called Victim Suspect. And one of the huge learnings for me is that I found out that it's okay for police in interrogation rooms to lie to you. I didn't know that. And Victim Suspect is a heart-wrenching documentary to watch for that very reason. People who came in as victims and ended up being charged. You wear them down, you lie to them, it's just manipulative. And then the Stringer is about the man who took the photo, the one in Vietnam where the young girl was naked and running away from this blast that had happened. And then The Truth About Jussie Smollett was another one I recently read or viewed, and then Cover Up. And then I've put down that our current reality of who's calling the shots, who's breaking the rules is dealing with ICE. So hands went up. I want you to ask questions, and then if your questions don't get answered, or I will answer them, and then I had a reader submit some. Yes, my dear.
I commend you for all the research that you did, and it's nice to hear that you really like the.
Oh, yes, researching was my favorite.
As far as the frequently asked questions that you had in your writing,
yes,
they bothered me.
I see. Can you explain why
Well,
the questions bothered you?
They bothered me until I changed my mind.
She said they bothered me until I changed my mind about them. You figured out why I wrote those questions, didn't you?
Well, I think it's needed to ask a question in order to search for the answers.
Yes.
You know, for example, the main character of the book.
Yeah.
Why did he
sat down
lies throughout his life?
And for those of you who have read the book, I start by reviewing St. Aubyn's history and what dysfunction there was in his history, which may have led to. But because, Anne, I knew only what I knew and didn't feel I could write down what I didn't want to make anything up. That's where the questions came from. I wondered if he was neglected as a baby. I wondered if his mother was so traumatized by her own past that she couldn't attend to him in a nurturing way. I have no idea if St. Aubyn's father was silent or smacked him around. I had no idea, and I couldn't speculate on that. So I wrote the questions in order to allow the reader to think about what might have been the case, because I didn't know the facts.
I thought they were really useful.
Good, good, I'm glad. And then some of those questions were used to help you transition to the next chapter as well. Gary?
Yeah, I just wonder how your research and writing has impacted the way you think and live.
Ah.
How has it impacted you?
Interestingly, I think the reason I enjoyed the researching part of it is because I've always been a person who asks questions. And I've had to learn throughout my life to not start with the word why, because that can put people on the defensive. I've started to ask questions with the words, help me understand. Help me understand, because I want to know. I'm one of those people. Curious people want to know. And I've been asked by 3 different people about when is the next book gonna come out and what would that book be about? Well, like I say, I'm going back to the beginning. It was never on my bucket list to write a book. But I'm still a curious person, so I also remain open to how the spirit might move me. Rick?
Sounds like you learned that the golden rule, those that have the gold makes the rules.
Yes.
Those that have the gold also write the history.
Yes, yes. And that too is, I think, an important learning to be able to say, yeah, Black slaves were not writing our history books in the 50s and 60s. And so, yes, point well taken. He's fallen down on his job. Rick asked, or just stated that the people who have the gold tend to write the rules and the history. So,
I thought,
yes.
well, I did more just a comment. Thank you, Steve, for finally doing the job. When I saw your genealogy there.
Yep.
I wondered how it worked out when Paul married Nancy and Mavis.
Oh, you're right. Oh, my goodness. Yes, yes. Those are 2 separate entities. Yeah, it's called bigamy.
A need for a semicolon or?
I just have a comment, reading this in 2025, I thought it was kind of humorous that these men got in so much trouble for stealing men's suits.
Yes,
You know, that suits and silk ties and.
and overcoats and shirts, silk shirts, yeah.
Yeah, I just thought, wow.
And so that was one of a reader's questions is, and that's the organized crime that was going on. And I didn't find out about the organized crime of fencing high quality men's clothing until after the fact, when I was reading into the 1934s and found that one of the accomplices was part of that organized crime, but it was drugs. By 1933 and 1934, when the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover was cracking down on St. Paul. None of you asked about that O'Connor system. What was that O'Connor system? But those of you who are native to St. Paul probably know that he was a chief of police from 1920 to 1900 to 1920 for most of those years. And he provided sanctuary to hardened criminals, or any criminals, as long as they paid the price, they checked in, followed his rules. So the FBI in the early 1930s started to crack down on that organized crime. And yes, we were one of the hot spots.
Well, isn't that too why they went away from St. Paul to commit their crimes?
Absolutely.
Is that where it is?
Mountain Lake. And so just so you know, Alyssa grew up in Mountain Lake. And so she, of course, had to buy the book for her father so that he could read about things he didn't know. Yes, what happened was any crime you committed had to be outside of the city of St. Paul, which meant Minneapolis was fair game. St. Cloud, Anoka, all of those places outside of St. Paul
We had a lot in White Bear.
and White Bear.
Wow.
Exactly, because there was money there. There was money there too. And so that is one area I could have branched off into more deeply, was more about the organized crime specific to St. Paul and men's clothing. So they had to steal, or they would go out and steal from many different small towns that had high quality men's clothing. And then they'd bring it back and fence it, sell it to local folk who were reselling them after they ripped off the tags. Yes, right.
I'd like to get a business suit from 1931. Do you know where I can get one?
Yes.
Oh, just say.
Yeah.
One of the biggest, just illegal brewing operations was done in Blooming Prairie, Minnesota.
Yeah.
Can pass it back and Fred.
So Tony, just going back to when you got asked to do this, at one point, I mean, was it like the first file you read or into it when you found out this guy was not on the up and up?
Well, the real story, the true story is, Gene Magnuson died, right before COVID. And that's when my sister-in-law and her sister Mavis were cleaning out the farm in, Rush City, Minnesota, and came across the photograph. I set to research and found two people with the exact same name in World War I, and I could not discern who was who. And then because I was still teaching, I needed to learn how to be an online teacher, put this project on the back burner until November of 1922. And I was so excited when the History Center reopened, because I knew that when I had a prison file, I could cross-check pictures. Because you can't get pictures online of criminals. You have to see their files. And so I looked at and went up to the library. Now, these two are the same people, right? And she said, they sure look like it to me. So I was able to verify that the guy in the military uniform was the guy in the mugshot. Yes.
Is there anybody in your family who didn't want the secrets to be told?
No, he was so far gone, if
Okay.
you will. And Virgil, as I say, salt of the earth man. He had no interest. He was loved deeply by his mother and his adopted father. Actually, no, it was mostly his mother. And it just wasn't of interest. So at this point in time, the other thing you need to know is I had the agenda that I was going to write the book for these people. I don't know if any of them have even read it.
Oh, really?
Correct. But that's where I understand it. It was my agenda.
Hey.
These two siblings have the book. And they have read that. She hasn't called me yet, but Nancy and I have been talking about this from the get-go. And one funny story about that conversation I was having with my sister-in-law and my brother, saying, well, I found out he was a career criminal. And then I found the information on Bethany Home where Esther was able to stay and be cared for. And my brother, he just shook his head and he goes, where do you find this stuff? And that, of course, is what research is you're just being a detective. You're just following the paper. and doing what you can to figure it all out. So, Gary, you had another question?
Well, yeah, and also a comment. It strikes me, this comment first,
Okay,
strikes me that you start writing this, but you're writing about Albert,
yes,
okay?
mhm,
Because he's an interesting person because he's a criminal.
yes.
Okay, you don't write about Virgil because he's an upstanding soul to the earth.
You are exactly right.
And I think that's not true today, too, of all of us.
Oh,
The
sure.
interesting people are ones who are a little shady is the wrong
Yeah,
word.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
Had secrets is what I call it.
Correct.
Had secrets.
but my question really is, have you had any time to reflect on possible parallels between the prison system in that time or government agencies and the way they operated and what's going on today?
Well, I-
Throwback to the good old 20s.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't think that the process of criminality has ever ended. I don't think that the process of systems being corrupted has ever ended. Sometimes it's written about more simply because we got what's happening now in our city that the whole world knows about us now. That's one of the big differences too, is that what happens right now can be across the ocean in 5 seconds because of video. And years ago, in fact, that's why I believe that Albert St. Aubin was able to get into the military with a criminal background. Oh, did I tell you how many times he was incarcerated? 5. And it was over 4 different states. And so I didn't even read his file from South Dakota, from Pennsylvania, from Ohio. I didn't read those because you have to go there. And I wasn't even pretending to be the kind of author who was going to be creating a a stellar book that was going to be making the list. That wasn't the objective. But someone who really wanted to do it right up, they would have to go to those states and do a lot more digging. And his job that he put when he was about 20 and he was incarcerated was he was a strong man in the vaudeville. That was his job. And he ended up being a cook in the military and in prison. And what I joked about at the end with my sister-in-law is, now I know why you're a foodie. Because my sister-in-law loves cooking and baking. And his specialty was baking, and that's her specialty too. I don't know that she liked that I drew that. But it's fascinating though, isn't it? She didn't know that, but she had that natural interest in food.
I like how you ended the book with the love part of us.
Yes, and another note about Bob Reichman, when he was processing with me after he had read draft 1, he said, well, I think Virgil is the hero of this book because he broke the cycle. And I said, nope.
Esther.
She broke the cycle.
Yeah, Esther's the hero.
She is the heroine of this story.
And despite him being such a stinker, the rest of the family.
Exactly. Exactly. And I didn't write I didn't talk with you about Albert's brother Frank, but he was a piece of work too. And he had 3 different wives and children with each of them. And he just kept marrying the same age. Even as he got older, his wife was always about 20 years old. And he had 3 different families. Yeah. And so I actually, through Ancestry.com, was in touch with some of his brother's relatives. So I found a woman who is the counterpart in that family line, Frank's family line, that my sister-in-law is in Albert's line. And so her words to me, her first words were, oh, I really enjoyed reading the book. What are you gonna write next? And I said to her, well, Renee, you're Frank's great or granddaughter. You gotta do that writing. Because that's not of interest to me to go into the family anymore.
Did
Chris.
Albert have any other progeny?
Not that we're aware of, no. No,
Huh.
and he had 2 common law wives, and then one woman he eventually did marry, but he was 50 something before they got married. They were both in their 50s. So I don't know if he had any other offspring.
He was in prison off and on.
Yeah, he was in prison too. Yes.
Is anybody in the whole system doing? Is anyone in the whole system doing DNA stuff with Ancestry or anything like that?
Well, I know that one of the questions that one of the readers had was, how do you know that that Virgil was his son? Well, it's clear from the photograph. It's also clear from the fact that she was 19 years old. And I'm sure she was not promiscuous. She knew right away. In fact, on the back of the photograph, it said, Albert St. Aubin, Virgil's father. She knew. So DNA, here's what I know about my sister-in-law. She's like 75% Swedish. And then there's this quarter from grandpa that included French. Because Saint Aubin, I'm not even saying it correctly. I think the French way to say it is Saint Aubin. I think it's AU is actually pronounced O. Aubin.
Aubin.
Yeah, Aubin with not even much of an articulation of the N at the end. So we know he was French. We know that and there was also in my sister-in-law's DNA, there was also some Eastern European in there. And that certainly seemed more likely from the 0.25% that she got from her. Yes.
Just the follow-up was if any of the current people are in that whole database and he had children other than that they could be given flags from DNA.
Yes, and of course that would take a person of interest to be able to follow that.
Not you.
Not me. But you know, I do have DNA here. Her parents were not there was no DNA sample from them. But you're right that there is a way to track unknown relatives through DNA. I haven't done it. Okay, I want to see, it's time for us to go. I want to see if we either, did I answer the question of why it's more journalistic than narrative?
Yes.
Because I wanted to keep it all factual and that the stealing of clothes was fencing and, let's see, and then those questions, you address the questions. So that's it. Thank you very much for coming.
Oh my. Yes, I suppose. It's a little